Hello everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tails Crafts. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a 10 card one kit video featuring our new Halloween party card kit. Here I'm going to go over everything that's included in the kit, including these two embellishment mixes, a 6 by 8.5 inch paper pad. You're going to notice that some of the images are in the stamp set as well as the die that you get in this kit, so everything matches very nicely. And with that size paper, you can make slimline and A7 cards. You get the cute Halloween 6x8 stamp set. I am pulling in the coordinating dies for today's video, but the card kit does not include the dies. Those would have to be purchased separately. Then you get a 5 layering cute Halloween background stencil. This is so adorable, and I had so much fun using this stencil. It's definitely my favorite part of the kit. And again, those are 6x8 stencils. So again, great for A7 cards. And then you also get the A7 striped cover plate. In this, you get the cool striped background that coordinates with the label that's in the Halloween party stamp set. And then you also get those cute layering ghosts that are also in the stamp set, but they're a little bit larger and you can paper piece them if you're not much of a stamp and colorist. And this die is not a part of the kit. I will have a separate video on it, but I wanted to showcase it because it coordinates perfectly with the card kit if you wanted to have a little extra piece. It is called the A2 ghost shaped card die, and it makes the cutest little RSVP cards for your party invitations that you can make with this kit. So I am going to start by coloring the few images that are included in the stamp set. The stamp is primarily a large label meant for invitations. Now with that striped cover plate, you can do more than just Halloween parties. In fact, I will have a add-on specific to Christmas because obviously the stripes you can do red and white and do like a candy cane look to it. So the stamp in this kit has a few images to accent the invitation, but it's primarily sentiments that you can combine together to create custom party invitations, which you'll see in today's video. And that is partially why this video is so long. These cards took me a long time because there is a lot of small details that I don't normally have on these 10 card one kit videos. And also, I did a lot of extra work by double or triple layering a lot of my stamps and die images. It's also important to note that this card kit is geared towards A7 card makers. I did create 2 A2 cards in today's video, but the rest are A7 or slimline. So definitely works with those larger card sizes, which is nice, and that's part of the reason why this card kit's a little more expensive than our typical ones. It is because you get some larger items such as the paper pad, the stencil, and the die set, but it is an adorable little card kit, one of my favorites. You guys know I love Halloween, so of course I am a little biased, but the whole die that coordinates with the stamp is something I'm very excited about. It's something I'd like to continue doing, not just with Halloween parties, but birthdays, Christmas parties, baby showers. So this whole concept of having an invitation stamp that coordinates with the cover plate will continue. And I will also bring out smaller stamp sets that will coordinate with those cover plates that can work year-round, such as the striped one. Now, I also brought out a scary Halloween party card kit because I know typically us Halloween hostesses usually have one or the other type parties. The cute ones are more for kids, for trick-or-treaters, or for people that just aren't into spooky Halloween imagery. And then there's the scarier, spookier hostesses such as myself, and that's the style that we gravitate towards. So I kind of made 2 card kits so that, you know, each one can cater to someone's preferences. But that kit has the same concept with the invitation format that coordinates with the cover plate, except that cover plate is specific to Halloween. So in the future, I will have some that are specific to birthday or Christmas or whatever it may be, but then I'll have those year-round ones that I'll try to add in so that you can get multiple uses from it. And here are all the striped cover plates that I pre-die cut. You can see that I cut all of my stamped images out that I colored, and I'm sorry, I didn't even explain the coloring process, but you guys know Copic coloring is my favorite way to color stamps. I always go from darkest to lightest. Then I also pre-cut my little ghosts, which I will show you how to paper piece those. For some reason, I added this ink blending before I did that. I think it's because I end up cutting the striped cover plate from this ink blended piece, and I was already in the mode of cutting out all those striped pieces, which I just showed you. You do not need that many striped plates cut. That was for me to add additional die cuts behind these invitations. I actually did not make the invites into A7 card bases because the invitation itself is already on the front of the card. So in order to make them slightly more substantial and heavier, that is why I cut those additional die cuts. And for me personally, I like the look of that more. However, you can avoid that if you want to just glue the striped cover plate and the invitation to the front of the card, and then you can just have the inside be blank if you want to write a custom message. So here's that ink blending I did: Dusty Concord, Shaded Lilac, Dried Marigold, and Carved Pumpkin. I tried not to mix the purple and orange together because they are they are complementary. Purple and yellow are, and orange is almost yellow. So you're not going to get the prettiest color in the middle, so I did not do a whole lot of blending in the center. I'm also being quite soft here. I don't want this to be super dark. Now I'm just taking some clear water. Well, obviously water is clear. I'm taking regular water and splattering it onto this background. And then I'm also going to take out my Gonzai Tombi Gold watercolor and flick some speckles using that onto the panel. So then I took my striped cover plate, ran that through my die cut machine, and you're going to get the stripe background, and it's also going to cut the label from the center. So you basically get two pieces that you can work with, and I will use that center piece on a card. So I will have two cards out of this background. I thought about keeping those stripes that cut out from the die. I had the crazy idea of inlaying them all back into the card, and that was a horrible idea, which you will see later. So I scrapped that, but at the time I kept them in their own little pile. Here are those little ghosts that are nested inside the A7 striped plate. These are the same ghosts from the stamp set, and they are quite small, so they have very small layering pieces. So I opted to just make two cards with these ghosts because they do take quite a bit of time to paper piece. But I thought I would still show it because these are adorable. If you saw my product showcase video, you know I use these ghosts on a lot of my card samples because they're just so darling. So I will have the Scary Halloween card kit video out as well. I was not anticipating that these cards take so long, and it's just because I really overcomplicate my cards. You're going to see that in today's video, and you're probably going to say I'm not going to do that, which is totally understandable. But I am such a stickler with my cards, and a lot of them I take with me to shows, so I purposely put tons of layers on them because they're handled a lot. So it took me a lot longer to finish these cards than a normal 10 card one kit video does, also just because of the sheer amount of details I put in. And so I think the Scary kit will probably come out on Friday, if not Monday. And as you can see, each of these ghosts has a little costume on. I love the ghost with the witch hat. That one's my favorite. But the other one is a devil and a cat. They even include some tiny cheeks and eyeballs. Now, if you don't want to fiddle with those very small pieces, you can use black pearls for their eyes and pink pearls for their cheeks. But as you can see, I keep all my small die cuts in a little bowl so I don't lose them. Now I'm going over all the details on the ghost with a fine liner, so their arms, the eyebrows, the little tie on the cape. And here's how they turned out. They are quite adorable. I did do 6 total, so I have them all lined up. And now I'm ready to get started on my 10 cards. So I'm going to take the label from the stamp set. Now this is what creates your invitation. On it, it has the time, address, and RSVP, and then inside the banner is where you would put the date of the party. You can see at the top of the stamp that it's open. That is so that you can put whatever header you want at the top. So you can put you're invited to a birthday party or, you know, a Christmas party. In this case, it'll be Halloween parties. But this just shows that you can have multiple uses with this stamp, which I absolutely love. I just think this is great for stationery in general. Even if you're not much of a card maker, if you have simple ink and a stamp block, you can really customize your own invitations very easily with it. So in this case, I am using clear embossing, or not clear, I'm using Versamark, which is a clear ink, to stamp out the label, which I then poured purple glitter embossing powder over. And then for the header, I decided to stamp it on a separate piece of cardstock because I wanted that to be embossed with orange powder. So I didn't want the purple and orange to mix, so instead I'm going to cut that sentiment out separately and pop it up over my label. What's nice is the coordinating dies do include the sentiments. The stamp includes all the numbers, so from 0 to 9, so that you can write out the time of your party and the date. So you also get every day of the week, Monday through Sunday. You get the word October because this is a Halloween set. So for the Christmas version, I will have obviously December. There's even AM and PM. Everything you need to write out all your party information, apart obviously from your address, that would be handwritten. Okay, so the coordinating die is one solid die that cuts out each individual number and day of the week. I did not want to have, you know, a gazillion little dies and stamps that would do everything individually. Now, if you want to cut apart your stamp and stamp directly onto the label, you can do that. But what I'm doing instead is cutting out each individual number and day of the week, and I'm just going to glue them on top of the label. Totally up to you. I like that the die has it all in one die so you don't lose those little pieces, but just thought I would point that out. You can also make frames for your labels by using the coordinating die and nesting the same shaped die from the A7 stripe plate inside. So you'll see that I'll use that on my second card design, and that's really great if you want to make shaker cards. So here I have a bunch of labels that don't have any stamping. I'm just using them to back behind my embossed one. And then here's the sentiment. I'm also going to pop that up. And here's where you see a lot of my time went to just triple or double layering a lot of these die cuts. So that's going to go at the top. And I even triple or double layered the tiny numbers. And that's, again, just personal preference. I really think it's worth the extra time. Now, if you're not someone that wants to handle small die cuts, again, that is when you can cut apart the stamps and just stamp it directly onto the label. What I like about the coordinating dies is I can stamp the party information on a different color so it stands out more. So you can see for the date and time, I stamped that information with black ink on orange cardstock, so it really stands out nicely. I also took the spider from the stamp set. I cut him off the web and just have him dangling from the word party. I thought that was really cute. What I should have done there is added the October or Tuesday, October 31st, but I just put October 31st, so I had a blank space there, so I added the spider there instead. But you can see that label to the left, I added the Saturday to the date, and I used that border that I die cut using the coordinating die and the die that's included that's nested inside the A7 stripe cover plate. And with that one, I also did a lot of silver heat embossing to give it a different look. So I love that you can customize your invitations to match your party colors. And I just had a blast making these. I really think it's such a great new product that can be added upon. And you guys know that is what I love about my job, is when I can continue creating products that can work together. So here is my black striped cover plate. I believe this has 3 additional die cuts behind it, so it is quite thick. And again, the reason I made it thick is because I end up cutting off the flap on the A7 card base, because I felt like I didn't need to write anything inside this card. All of the party information was already on the front. So you'll see I'm just going to cut that in half. But I'm just right now gluing it to the front. And then here's the label. I stamped the main label with black ink on gray cardstock. And then I cut the header and the party information, as well as that black border, from black cardstock that I silver heat embossed. Right now I am adding foam tape to the center. This is going to slightly raise the label, but for the most part, it's about the same height as the quadruple layered stripe plate. It's not too high, too much higher than that. So I am going to add glues around the edges where it's going to overlap the stripe. And then I can just scatter my ghosts around the label. And you certainly don't have to put an invitation label in the center. You can use the label and add whatever scene you want inside. Or you can just use the stripe plate by itself with a scene inside as well. So there's a lot of options here. And I do want to ask you guys if you prefer these larger card size card kits, because they are a little more expensive, and that's just because you're getting larger products in these. But you know, I know not everyone is A7 card makers either. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer the smaller kits or the larger ones? Because I did make a couple A2 cards in today's video as well. So definitely don't feel like if you're not an A7 card maker, you can't still use this kit, because I did make a few. I am going to finish off this design with a scattering of the orange gems that came in the card kit. And either way, both sized card kits are a great value. I always try to make that happen. So they range anywhere from 35 to 40% off. This one was 35% in savings. I believe it's a $93 value for $59.95. So definitely a great value. And I'm happy to release products specific to parties, because I am someone that does host an annual Halloween party, and I just for the past couple years have been using the same stamp set because there really are none out there. So I knew when I was creating this Halloween collection this year, I wanted to have an entire section dedicated just to Halloween party invitations. And then if you haven't seen our new pop-up, those make great trick-or-treat favors or party favors. So it's not just the card kits that are party themed, but the entire collection. So if you want to see the entire release, definitely check out my product showcase video. I'll have it linked. Here I am working on the next card, which is actually the exact same design as the first one. It's just a different color scheme. And I often do this with my 10 card one kit videos, because if I like something, I will do it again. And in this instance, I filmed one of these for TikTok and I guess 2 of these for YouTube. So yes. Technically, I made 12 cards in today's video, but with 10 designs. So I'm still calling it a 10 card one kit video, but I thought I would show you this other version of the same card, because just by changing up the colors, you do get a different look. So again, I did, I believe, triple layer that stripe cover plate behind the orange die cut. And then in the center, I added foam tape, and then I'll also add my invitation label. And then I'm going to take my little ghosts and spread them out. These ghosts are not laid out the exact same way as the last card. It is slightly different. You can see up on that top right corner of the label, some of my embossing powder wiped off, so I'm using the ghost to hide that. And here is Goose making one of his first appearances on the channel. He is officially big enough to jump on my standing table. So he is enjoying getting into trouble. So again, I'm using a combination of foam tape and glue here to pop up the ghosts. And then this time I'm going to use the other embellishment mix that comes in the card kit. This one has purple, green, and white gems. And then there's also some clay orange stars, which I love those stars. They are so cute. And once all of those embellishments are added, that is going to complete my second card. And as you can see, we're 20 minutes into this video and we only have 2 cards. So that just shows you the amount of time that went into these cards today. So here is another design I made for my showcase video that inspired these two, so I thought I would show that one because it's the same layout, except that one had been cut from purple cardstock. Alright, so now I'm going to pull in the paper pad, and I'm going to pick one of the papers that has a pre-made scene. I'm going with the one with the cat sitting in the pumpkin, and this cat is in the stamp set. So here you can see the smaller version of that cat that I'm going to add to this card. That cat is also in the Perfect Night die set, so if you're not much of a stamper, but you want to have that cat that you can paper piece, there is a die for that. Alright, so I just kind of laid out a scene. You can see at the bottom there's a fence printed onto the paper, so that already kind of set the scene for my kitty that's sitting inside the pumpkin. And then above her I will add the witch ghost and my sentiment. So very simple layout. This is another one you can very easily mass produce and swap out the ghosts. And you can also swap out the ombre paper because there are actually 3 ombres in the paper pad. I thought something was missing, so I'm taking the bats from the stamp set and I'm going to stamp them around the sentiment. So the designs that don't include the party info label, like I did on my last 2 cards, these ones just have a sentiment indicating that they're invited to a Halloween party. So on these ones, I will stamp out my party information on the inside of the card. So because I'm stamping on slick cardstock, I am using VersaFine ink. It's not transferring that much ink to the paper, so I'm taking my fine liner and just going over the bats to make them slightly darker, and then I'm going to clear heat emboss these bats. I highly suggest that if you stamp on slick pattern paper like this, otherwise it's just going to smudge. Even if you wait a couple, like 30 minutes, it's still gonna smudge. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear heat emboss that. That's also gonna make the bats nice and shiny. And then I'm going to lay out my scene again, glue everything down, and then this green ombre pattern paper is going to go on top of the black star pattern paper from the paper pad. I like that that one is a nice neutral tone-on-tone pattern, but it adds a little bit of interest to the background. So this card is actually a mini slimline, but I believe you can make this into a full slimline just by continuing the ghosts all the way up. Just because that pattern paper is 6 by 8.5, you can totally make slimline cards with it, and that ombre is just going to continue up. Alright, so I am going to mat this with orange cardstock. I thought this really brightened the card up, and it tied in with the orange on the pumpkin. And then all I do now is add a couple embellishments. And typically when I'm adding gems or pearls, I like to add them in a diagonal. So that completes the third card. And now we're going to work with the stencil. And for some reason my camera cut off when I was heat embossing these ghosts, but I'm just going to reattach this stencil because I have to go over those what are they called? Candy corns. At first I thought they were going to be a different color, but as I was looking at the stencil I realized that, oh, this part does need to be white, and that's probably why I put the ghosts and the candy corn base on the same stencil, because they are intended to be the same color. So I'm just going to go back with my Versamark ink and a finger dauber and add white embossing powder. So I'm opting to use embossing powders instead of ink this time because I wanted to do something different, and also I wanted to stencil this background on black cardstock, and the only way to do that was with embossing powders to get a really nice bright result. So this took a lot longer than I expected. You'll see later as I add color that the color, when they heat set, it blends into the background. It's almost like a semi-transparent embossing powder. So on the areas it hits the white, like the second layer of the candy corn, it's nice and bright, but the moons that are directly inked onto the black cardstock, they almost turn like a green, ugly color. So I had to do multiple layers of the yellow embossing powder to really get it to where I was happy with it. You'll see I get a little bit smarter for the orange layer, and I opt to first add white embossing powder as a base color, and then I go over the stencil again with my Versamark ink and then pour over orange powder. So here's my yellow, and as I'm adding this, it looks pretty before it's heat set. So I thought this would be no problem. And I'm doing all my heat setting off camera. I have a separate area for heat embossing, but I am taking my little dry paintbrush here to wipe off any excess powder. So here you can see that's the first layer of yellow when it's heat set. It kind of turned this green color. It's not super bright. So I thought maybe doing a second layer of yellow would help it, but it actually ended up needing 3 layers. And then you can also see the yellow that are on the candy corn are nice and bright. So I knew if I had a white base underlayer that my embossing powders were going to be more vibrant. So I'll do that, like I said, for the orange layer. But for now, I'm just going to try to do a second layer of yellow for the moons. I love that these stencils are 6 by 8, so I'm not worrying about any excess ink on the edges. This can obviously work for A7 cards, and I can trim it down if I want to use this background as an A2 panel. So here's my third layer. I'm just going over those moons. It's very easy to pick what pieces you want to be a different color. So if I wanted the moons to be blue, I can still make those second layer of the candy corn yellow and then easily just use a finger dauber to make the moon blue. So I was happy with that third layer. It's still not perfect, but it's definitely more yellow, and I was happy with that. So now I'm going to add the third layer of the stencil, and this one has dots and stars. I thought that this layer would be cute with purple embossing powder. So again, this time I am using my ink dauber to blend my Versamark ink through the stencil. I'm going to pour white embossing powder over it, heat set it, come back, overlay the same stencil over the area that was white heat embossed, add the Versamark through the stencil, and then pour purple glitter embossing powder over it. So it's basically doing 2 steps to get this result. but I will say it was totally worth it. I love the shininess that the embossing powder gave all the layers, and like I said, this is the only way to get a nice, vibrant background on black cardstock. So here I went ahead, heat set the white powder. Now I am attaching it back to the stencil, just adding tape to the back so it doesn't move. I'm making sure to line it up with the white stars that I just heat set. And then again, just going over the exact same areas with my Versamark ink. And then I will pour purple glitter embossing powder over this layer. And I did not clean my stencils, so I left the Versamark on the stencils and immediately went to stencil my second background for today's video with Distress Oxide inks on white paper. And you'll see when I show that, that was a lot faster because I wasn't basically doubling up on all the layers like I am here. Plus I didn't have to heat set in between, but by leaving the Versamark on the stencil, it mixed with the Distress Oxide inks that I was using, and I was able to clear heat set the entire panel, which made it shiny. So if you ever want to have a shiny stenciled background, what you can do is rub your Versamark pad over each of your stencils, then just blend through the stencils the exact same way you normally would with inks. And then at the end, you'll have that Versamark mixed in with the ink, so it's going to be sticky and you can go over the entire thing with clear embossing powder. You don't have to do it with each individual layer. So I thought that was a great hack that I learned from doing this video, and I wanted to share that. So you do have to do it relatively quickly though. So after I was done, embossing this background, I immediately went to ink the second one, just so that Versamark wouldn't dry on the stencil. All right, so here's the third layer. This is going to be the orange. And what I also like about the stencil is I designed it to really go by color. So while you have the option to kind of pick which areas you want to be a different color, you can do what I'm doing and just have each stencil be its own designated color. And in the end, you will have 5 different colors on the finished background, which is really fun. I love these layering stencils. I definitely want to bring out more of these in the future. So here you can see I just did the first layer in white. Now I'm just going over all those areas again. And then I will pour the orange powder over this layer. And this is when I feel like it really starts to transform. It just looks like such a fun background. And it definitely helps that I have a lot of different colored embossing powders. These are all Sparkle and Sprinkle powders. I think they're out of business now, unfortunately, but they had very reasonably priced embossing powders, and I love them. I think this last layer I am doing here, I am using a Wow embossing powder, which was very shiny, and it's a black color. So I wanted the faces of the pumpkins and the ghosts to be black. So right now I'm selectively inking those faces. I am not going over the spiders or the bats quite yet because I wasn't sure if I wanted those to be a different color. But here I'm just going to first start with the ghost. You see in the middle there I missed that center ghost. That's fine. I'll just heat set it and then go back and add that later. So I'll go ahead and heat set that. And then I decide that I want the spiders to be white. Felt like I just wanted some more white. The ghosts weren't enough for me. So again, you can just kind of one layer at a time selectively ink up different parts of the stencil to be different colors. So I'll go ahead and heat set that. That is the trick though, if you are doing multiple colors from one stencil, you do have to heat set in between. So I think this background ended up taking me almost an hour to fully finish. So I went ahead, took that stencil back, the final layer, and this time for the bats, I am going to use that same black embossing powder. As you can see, my black cardstock isn't truly black because that black powder is definitely darker. So I love how this turned out. I did not want to cover this background up. I spent too long on it. So instead I'm going to layer up some circles and a sentiment from the stamp set. I went with the You're Invited to a Halloween Costume Party again, going to glue that onto the small circle, and I was planning on just gluing that to the bottom, but it just wasn't standing out. So I'm moving it around trying to find the best placement. And then I decided to add a orange circle mat behind it. I did have to hand cut this circle, so it's not perfect, but that definitely helped that stand out. So I ended up adding that to the bottom right corner. And then I'm just going to add a couple embellishments around the sentiment. I really didn't have to do this because there's just so much going on in the background, but I had the embellishments. I figured I would use them. And I think I matte this panel on the same orange cardstock I used for the circle mat, and then glue this to an A7 card base. And I think I just glue the panel to the card base with the white peeking through the edges. And this is one of my favorite cards. I love how it turned out. It definitely was a lot of work having to brush away those stray powders with the paintbrush every time, but I think I did a good job with it, and look how shiny that background is. It's so cool. Okay, so now I'm going to work with that ink blended panel we made at the very beginning of this video. If you remember, I cut that from the striped cover plate, and then I was left with the inner label, and I wanted to use that label on an A2 card. So I have it, and I wanted to add it to a white card panel, but the white was a little too stark, so I took whatever purple ink was left on my blender brush and went around the edges of that panel. And then I'm going to use the kitty inside the pumpkin again and the cute little spider hanging from the spider web. I wanted to add the sentiment that says trick or treat, you are invited to a party with sweets, something along those lines. I honestly don't remember what it says, but it's very cute. And again, it's another party invitation sentiment. So I'm just going to stamp that directly onto the label with VersaFine ink. And then I'm also going to add the little embellishment stamps that have the bats and the stars, just to add a little more interest. This is a pretty simple design, so I did off camera clear heat emboss that so it didn't smudge. And then I'm going to stack up this label with various die cuts, and I had a bunch of these from cutting those striped cover plates at the beginning. And now I have to layer up my cat. Instead of layering the entire cat with various die cuts, I'm just going to add foam tape to the areas that will overlap the card panel, and then I will glue the rest of the cat flat onto the label. I'll do the same thing to the spider. And again, this spider is also in the Perfect Night I guess it is a coordinating die set. So if you are looking for some supporting elements for this card kit, like I said, I would suggest the A2 ghost-shaped cover plate die, which I will use that on its own designated video, but also the Perfect Night has the stamped images made into dies. So it's a nice complementing piece to the kit. All right, so I did add Google eyes to the spider. Every Halloween, I have to add Google eyes to at least a couple of my cards each year. And then I'm just going to embellish the card with both embellishment mixes this time. And I am adding the orange embellishments to the orange section, and the purple to the purple. Again, gluing them in a diagonal. And then I'm going to mat this onto some black cardstock that is cut to the size of an A2 card base. And then I'll glue that to my white card base. And then it's very easy just to place this inside your MISTI and stamp that label inside the card where you can write all your party information. Alright, so in the last card we used the label from the ink blended panel, and now we're going to use the striped cover plate from that ink blended panel. I wanted to stamp out the label using the same inks I used to ink blend, so here I am placing down a white cardstock scrap, and I also picked out a sentiment to add to the top of the header. All of them can be directly stamped with the label if you want. And I am just with my inks going to create the same ombre I ink blended. Being careful not to mix the purple and orange too much, but to make sure I get all those colors in there. And this is a very quick way to create an interesting stamped label. And again, if you wanted to cut apart all those numbers in the days of the week, you can, with the same inks, stamp all of your party information to the inside of the label, and you don't have to use the stamps. You can also handwrite everything. But instead, because I cannot cut apart my stamps, I am going to ink this up with Versamark ink, or VersaFine black ink, and stamp it onto some orange cardstock. And then use the coordinating dies to individually cut out all those numbers and days of the week. I will stamp this out twice because I wasn't sure if I needed one number twice or not. I don't think I ended up needing like 2 1s or 2 0s, but I just added that just in case. So here into the banner I'm adding Saturday, October 28th, and then on the time I'm going to add, I believe, 7 to 10 p.m. And I did double up these letters just so that they stood out a little bit more. So that is definitely where all the time goes into. It is the layering and paper piecing those small elements. Okay, so here is the striped plate that we cut from that ink blended panel. I'm just going to glue this onto my white card base, which isn't a base, it's really just a 5x7 panel. So I like that with this die you can get 2-for-1 cards pretty easily. I'm going to add my label to the center, and I love that the label stamping matches with the ink blending. This is where I decide that I want to try to inlay each individual stripe back to the background. I thought it would be a cool effect because that stripe plate is popped up with 4 layers of die cuts, but it was just too fiddly. It was too much work than it was worth. What I could have done is ink blended another panel the exact same way and just glued it, or glued the stripe plate to that to get a similar look, but I liked the white peeking through, so I left it alone. I quickly pulled up that stripe that I glued down and left it as is. All right, so I added my foam tape to the center of the label, then added my various stamped images. This is very similar to the first 2 cards I made, but this time I'm using the cats instead of the ghosts. Also going to pull in that spider at the top. And I just love that these stamped images complement the party invites so well. Yes, you don't get a ton of images, but the ones you get are perfectly sized, and you can add quite a few to them to these A7 cards. All right, and then as usual, we're going to embellish with the mix that's included in the card kit. And I have to give a shout out to my dad because he is the one that bags all of the embellishments. He mixes them for me. And not just the card kit mixes, all of them on the shop. And they are a great deal. If you have purchased our embellishment mixes or if you've received them in other card kits, you know that I pack in quite a bit of embellishments into that little bag. It's actually about 20% more than what I personally have purchased in the past, and it's 20% less expensive. They're only $3.75 a pack. All right, so we're moving on to, I don't even know what card number this is, but I wanted to use that adorable little bat from the pattern paper. So I went ahead and cut him into a square. I kind of wish I used the label from the A7 stripe cover plate, but you know, I've been using the label so much, the square I think looks okay. So I also cut some pattern papers. I cut the candy corn to 5x5. This is going to be a square card. And then I cut the orange to yellow ombre, which is the same pattern as the bat itself. So the bat is in the corner of the paper, and then the rest of it is an ombre. So I cut the ombre to this little arrow that's going to go across the candy corn just to break up that pattern a bit. And then I'm going to mat my bat onto some white cardstock. And again, this is another design you can use with the other pre-made pattern papers from the paper pad. And I create a lot of these pre-made patterns so that it makes these cards fairly quick, but you also have the option to just use the ombre, which I used with that mini slimline card and then also in the background of this card. So I am going to add that spider web. If you remember one of the first few cards we made, I just used the spider from the web, so I had the web left over. I'm going to add behind the square panel. Then I went with You're Invited to a Halloween Booth Day Party, and then I added that little cat to be sitting in front of the fence. So it just creates a little cute scene, and the pattern papers really show through nicely. So I love the sentiment that I used. So basically anyone with an October birthday, this would work perfectly for a Halloween themed birthday party. All right, so this is going to go onto a 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 white card base. You can see that I added some embellishments to the bat square, and that's going to finish off that card. So that one was very quick. It's nice to mix in those quick cards with those more involved, time-consuming cards. So here is the stencil again, and for video purposes, I broke up the two stenciled cards in, different areas of the video. But in reality, after I did that heat embossed background, I immediately went to do the ink stenciled background. So this is, like I said, has that Versamark ink still on it. I did not clean that off. So it's mixing with this, I think this is pumice stone ink for the first layer for the ghosts and the base of the candy corn. Then I'm going to move to the second layer, and here you can see it is much faster. This only took probably less than 5 minutes to fully create a background with. So the second layer is squeezed lemonade. I kind of wish I used mustard seed here, but this is fine. So I am blending the moon and the second layer of the candy corn with this stencil. Again, that Versamark ink is mixing, so it's going to leave this ink stickier for a longer time period. Now I'm moving on to the third layer, which is the orange. This is going to create the second layer of the candy corn and the pumpkin base. And I am going with the same colors I used on that embossed background, so I am not really changing the color scheme much here, or at all, actually. So now this third layer will be purple. I am using Villainous Potion. And I just love how easy it is. There's really no thinking involved here. The stencil is slightly bigger than my card panel, so I am not having any ink smudges. All right, and then the fifth and final layer is the black. And again, I feel like this is the one where you can probably mix two different colors if you wanted to, but I'm just gonna go with all black. All right, and now that Versamark ink is all mixed in with the colored ink, I can bring in my clear powder and cover the entire background with that and heat set it, and that's just going to make it shinier, and it will also darken the inks. I don't know the science behind that, but clear embossing powder just does that, which is nice for the black and makes it more stark, which is really pretty. So here's that shine. Definitely a great tip if you want, you know, a shiny background. So now I'm taking another one of those pre-made patterns, and these papers are double-sided. So if you're not someone that likes these type of papers, like I said, there's plenty of room just to use the ombre, or you can use the backside. So here I'm gonna take a label. This is the coordinating die for the label in the stamp set, and I'm going to use the rest of the ombre to cut that out. And then I thought about using my smaller cat, but the bigger one just fit perfectly. And then this is going to be a shaker card, so I'm going to create a frame using the coordinating die and the smaller label die that's included in the A7 stripe cover plate. I cut that out several times, the frame, from I believe 5 layers of heavyweight black cardstock. I'm just going to stack them up. This will be the shaker walls. And then for my 5th frame, I'm going to add acetate behind it before I glue it to the top of the stack. And I like that this label is still fairly small, so you see a lot of that background showing through. I do decide to cut that label from the stenciled background so that, again, I can have 2 cards from one background. So you'll see that a little bit later. Right now I'm just cutting off, or cutting my acetate around this frame to create my shaker window. And then I'll use the embellishment mix with the green, purple, white, and orange stars. And so I use that mix for several, if not all of my cards to embellish them, and then I use quite a bit of them in this shaker card, and I still have over half the pack left. So that's nice. All right, so here's where I decide that I want to conserve that center part. You know, you're not going to see it anyway. I might as well keep that for another card. All right, so now I can nest my green ombre layer inside, add my embellishments to the center. I'll take a few of them out. I'm trying to take the larger ones out. And then I'll go ahead and close that up and give it a couple seconds to dry before I start shaking it. I kind of wish I did 1 layer less. So instead of doing 5 stacked die cuts, I wish I did 4, because then all the embellishments wouldn't all fall to the bottom. but I still like how this turned out. So I'm going to add the cat to the center. I thought about adding it to the bottom right corner of the label, but I already did that design several times throughout my 10 cards, so I just opted to glue it right in the center. And then I'll go ahead and glue this to my card base. I have a black mat here that I am gluing on. And this is going to cover my white card base. And then I'll glue my stenciled background. And then my label right in the center. So here is where I'm a little disappointed that all the mix falls to the bottom, especially because that pumpkin pretty much completely covers the bottom. So I'm going to take that embellish mix again and just glue some of them directly onto the acetate. It would have been better to do this inside the shaker, but hindsight 2020. I thought this still ended up looking really nice. So that finishes off that card. So now we're going to use that label that we just die cut from that background, and I'm going to make it smaller by cutting it with the smaller label from the A7 stripe cover plate die. That way I can mat a larger one with black behind it. And I opted to use the pattern paper with the cute little spider with his web. I felt that the black wasn't standing out enough as a matte, so I went with an orange matte instead. This will be glued to the center. So this is another A2 card. And then I have my cat inside the pumpkin again. I'll glue her to the bottom right corner. Like I said, I used this layout several times because I just like it. And this time, instead of using foam tape, I am overlapping just some additional card stock pieces that will overlap the spider paper. I already went ahead and stamped out my sentiment. I wanted to have a two-tone sentiment, which I haven't done in a very long time, but I love how this turned out. I stamped out the trick or treat with black ink on orange cardstock, and then the rest of the sentiment I white heat embossed on black cardstock. So it just added some nice interest to this otherwise fairly simple card. And again, I'm just using the extra die cuts to layer behind. And then I think I'm going to add the spider. I'm going to cut him off the web and have him dangling from the sentiment. I did have to die cut some extra white die cuts behind so that he popped up from the background more. And I think that's just so cute. That spider is such a cute little embellishment. And then I added one more ghost to the left side of the label. Stack that up. Also, just because this pattern paper is fairly busy, so those stacked die cuts really help them to stand out more. All right, and then all I have to do is embellish again. And that will finish off. I have a feeling this is my 8th card. Possibly my 9th. We'll see. And I know this video is a lot longer than my normal 10 card 1 kit videos, but I did not want to cut any of the stenciling or, you know, the labeling, I guess, on the invitation. So I cut as much as I could and I sped up as much as I could, but it still ended up being super long. So I ended up matting this with some orange cardstock again, and then adding it to a black mat. And then this black mat will go onto a white A2 card base. I really like how this one turned out. It's definitely one of my favorites. All right, so now we are moving on to, yes, this is the 9th card. I'm taking the 3rd and final pre-made pattern paper and cutting a label from the 2 ghosts. It's just such a nice way to make some quick cards, and that ombre is already made for you, so there's no ink blended needed. But I am going to accent it with some additional stamped ghosts so that it's not so, just pattern paper. There's some more added to it. So I did stack up that label and added it to a slightly larger white one. So the larger label is the coordinating die from the stamp set, and the smaller one is nested inside the A7 stripe plate. So I like that you can use them together to create mats and shaker frames. So the Hey Boo is from one of the sentiments in the stamp set. It is connected to a party sentiment below it, so I just opted to cut the Hey Boo from that, and then below I used that extra orange sentiment that I used on my last card. Remember, I cut the trick or treat at the top and then did that 2-tone sentiment. Well, I was left with this orange piece that I decided to add to the bottom of the label, and then I just created a strip of green star pattern paper across the black star paper. And then the label is going to go in the center. This will be a nice horizontal card. And then all around, I'll add my various ghosts. This reminds me of Ghostbusters. I just love the colors on it. So all I'm going to do this time is just add the orange clay hearts because I felt like they needed a night sky. And there's so many stars already on this card, so I thought I would just continue with that. Alright, so this is going to be matted on an orange card panel, and then this will be glued onto a slimline card. And that's it. That one was pretty fast. And I'm so happy that the pattern paper is long enough to make slimline cards. You guys know that I can use 6x6 papers typically on a slimline card, but it definitely requires more work. So I just love this paper size. I think I'm just going to move to this size because I know a lot of my customers are the larger card sized makers, and this can obviously still be used on A2 cards. So I will admit, every 10 card 1 kit video has that leftover card where I have really no idea what else to do. So I just kind of scrapped together something. I went ahead and cut the striped cover plate from white cardstock. I thought it'd be nice to do a white on white card, and because it's stacked up you can really see that pattern nicely. Then I'm going to add the black label that is the coordinating die to the center. I wanted that to be flat on my card base, so I'm just using that stripe plate to line it up, and then I'll go ahead and glue the stripe plate on top. And then you can see over to the left that I die cut a pattern paper with the smaller label that will be glued or popped up in the center. And you might see that that pattern is recognizable. That is because it is the stenciled background on gray. So that's pretty cute. I kind of wish I added the sentiment to the bottom, but I ended up gluing that to the center. And then here are all the rest of my stamps. And I just opted to glue them all around the sentiment. And then I realized I had 2 vampire ghosts right next to each other. So I took that one off and replaced it with the witch. I kind of wish I took this cat off that I just glued down because I already have the cat at the bottom left, but I was just trying to fill in the space and I think it ended up still looking cute. So we'll embellish this one with the orange mix from the card kit. And that finishes off my final design. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all 10, or I guess technically 12 cards that I made using the Cute Halloween Party card kit. And I had a blast with this kit. Yes, for my personal party, I will probably use the Spooky Halloween card kit, but I think that these are some great ideas if you're hosting a trick-or-treat party, or if you are doing a kid's Halloween birthday party. There's so many different options here. You can keep it simple and stamp out all your party information on the inside of some of these flat card designs, or you can use the striped cover plate with the label that coordinates with it to make your invites. So thank you guys so much for watching my very long video. I have not posted a video this long in a very long time, but I did not want to cut any part of this video more than it already has been. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I will have the kit listed in my video description, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!